all those frontline baddies out there listening and non-frontline baddies, whoever's consuming our content. My name is Danny. This is episode 8 of the Frontline Baddies podcast. And before we jump into it, as always, I would just like to recognize Frontline Baddies operates off of the north of Turtle Island. We strive for decolonization, land back, and acknowledgement of continued colonization through the Canadian government. We are a group of humans that are Indigenous, refugee, immigrant, and settlers to Turtle Island. We acknowledge our ancestors' plight for us to be here. We acknowledge our siblings' trauma in this line of work. We did not choose it. It chose us. And today, for those of you who haven't been listening all that often, maybe this is the first episode you're listening to, my name is Danny. I'm a part of the Frontline Baddies crew. And then I have the two CEOs with me. Alongside is Eileen.
Hey everybody, co-founder here, and in Calgary we have Tracy.
Hello. I'm the other co-founder.
I'm the other founder. It's just a random person in Calgary filling in.
So today's episode we're going to be focusing on the topic of relationship breakdowns. It sounds really negative when we say it.
I was going to say, that's so light and happy.
Breakdowns! I'm like...
Are we breakdowning relationships? We're breaking them down?
Yeah, so we're breaking it down to talk about how working in frontline affects our relationship.
That looked like beatbox. We're breaking it down. We're breaking it down. Sorry.
We're breaking it down.
Eileen needs to host more on these episodes.
Oh my god, I get too into it.
I love it. Anyway.
Okay, so I guess the first question is, does working in frontline affect your relationships, whether that be your friends, family, dating, partners, whatever you want to, dog, I don't know. Does it affect Lou? I think it.
Yeah, I got something to say about that. Absolutely.
But anyways, yeah, so let's talk about it. Do you guys think it affects your relationships in any aspects? I do. I definitely think it affects my family, it affects my friends, and my dating life, definitely, which is why I'm still single.
And looking.
Don't DM me.
Don't DM me.
Do not want to.
Cut it out. Oh, what about you, Tracy, as the person who is actually in a long-term partnership? Would you like to weigh in?
Yeah. It would be interesting to hear from, different types of relationships that we all have. Like, Tracy, you're, I think, the only one here.
In a romantic
long-term relationship with a pretty cool dude. And here I am bopping around and, I don't know, Danny.
Yeah. I mean, in fairness, he and I met at another job site. He and I met at another job site. It wasn't in this line of work. So he and I had been friends for years. And then I think that really makes a difference just in general in relationships with partners, love partners, amours, spouses, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, we actually on the 25th hit our 4-year anniversary. So of this month. Yeah. So yes, it definitely has. And not obviously, I've been doing this longer than 4 years, so historical of things not lasting very long in the dating pool, kind of where you're at, Eileen. And then the long term, I find has been interesting living with someone. I guess that definitely has impacted how I show up to work as well as how I show up in my home life, which is weird.
Has there ever been a time where being a frontline worker has affected the decision making in your dating life? Has it ever?
Yes. Yes. Just yes. Well, because we talk about principles so much and values so much on this season specifically, and I feel like the same thing occurs in your day-to-day life. Your values are your values for a reason, and so work values kind of reinforce your personal values, and your personal values kind of reinforce work values sometimes, And I just think that I have definitely ended like first dates because someone just said something so heinous about someone who was like on the side of the road or whatnot. And it actually got to a point where when I was like dating, I would ask guys to go to a location in the downtown east side that I felt comfortable in. And a lot of them would just say no off the bat, which like led me to believe they were not my type of guys. And then the guys who would be willing to, there was usually like hesitation or a comment made, and then I just kind of knew. And then I would peace out because I didn't live too far away and I'd just walk home. So it started to just become a filter, I'm not going to lie. Like if they're not comfortable being at a bar that's down the street from my house, um, then yeah, then they don't belong in the downtown east side and I don't belong with them, obviously. That's how I felt about it.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I also kind of use like my work principles as filters in a way to screen out all these unnecessary people who are trying to get at me. And like, there's been, a recent incident where I was, seeing someone and wasn't sure about them because there was like, they seemed.
How do I already know what you're going to talk about?
I was
The
gonna say
person seemed
that's
I
why I'm
know
laughing because I
exactly.
already know what she's
the
gonna
person
talk
seemed
about.
perfect, I guess, on paper, and like,
Yeah.
I guess it was still in the phase where we were still getting to know each other and everything seemed great, but there was always something like weird or off about them that I just like couldn't pinpoint. And I remember like one afternoon we were hanging out, we were on our way to go get lunch and we were driving, and I was like really, really like struggling to decide whether I really liked this person or not. And I was just like, I'm gonna ask him a hard question, and maybe it'll show like like his true characters when answering that question. So I had asked him a question around, um, you know, generational trauma and the struggles of Indigenous folks in Canada and all that stuff, and their response was, at first very sympathetic, very seemingly compassionate, uh, and was like, really trying to be sympathetic towards the struggles. But then they did a little bit of a plot twist and started talking about how even though they understand like why people are in the situation that they're in, but don't try hard enough to get out of it.
Mm.
And the moment that they said, I don't understand why they haven't tried hard enough to get out of their situation, like they clearly just like haven't tried hard enough. That was when I pulled over and I was like, get out of my car. And that was when I knew that this was not my person. And it was not up for debate. You know,
Go
I'm
take
not
a
willing
walk.
to compromise. It's not a discussion. I'm not compromising whatsoever. And that was it. So,
I love it. I love it. Like, why waste more time?
yeah, honestly,
Yeah.
I don't have to. I don't know why I would like even like, I'm not gonna like, oh, I can change them. Like, you're a grown ass person. Like, I'm not gonna be like, it's not my job to like teach you compassion, frankly, truthfully,
Yeah,
Well,
seriously.
yeah, and empathy.
100%.
and empathy. If you ain't getting it by the time you're 37, I don't think you're ever gonna get it.
That's a mic drop right there. Absolutely.
Yeah, there's also like that piece of like our jobs are already so hard and emotionally draining, and a lot of emotional labor goes into them. And then we get home, and if our partner can't have like any sort of emotional intelligence, and we're going to have to teach them empathy and teach them compassion, which is emotional labor. If you're a parent, you know what I'm talking about. Like, no. Also, I don't need to be like mommy personally. I
Yeah.
also stand in
And
that. I want a partner. I
like
don't want to be a mommy.
I feel like when we talk about these things, like, oh, these are like our screening process, it seems very like, yeah, that should be the standard and you shouldn't be compromising on these like principles. But like, I just know way too many people who compromise their principles just for the sake of being in a relationship. And I just don't understand how people can like do frontline work and have like all the principles of like anti-racism, anti, like decolonization mindset, but then go home to a very ignorant partner who's like quite hateful, uncompassionate, unsympathetic. Like that must really burn you out on top of everything else, because coming home to that must be really tough to have
Yeah.
somebody who does not understand or sympathize with like the work that you do. And like that's not your solidarity team. I believe your partner should be your solidarity team.
Yeah. Well, as someone who had a partner like that for for just over 4 years, yeah, it burns you out. Burns you out a lot.
Yeah. And like, I've been in the situations like that where I've started a relationship with somebody and like, I'm thinking like, oh, they'll just eventually learn, or like they just don't know, or like, but they're really just like stuck in their own ways, and like I need to realize that that's something that I need to like make a deal breaker for myself, because I just can't put myself through that. Yeah.
Yeah. It really like is I think it's a learning curve when you're in it first, and then recognizing that day in and day out can be really difficult.
Yeah.
And you would ask the question like why people will quickly abandon their values when they're with partners. And I don't think so much like it's us abandoning it at first. I think it's like trying to give them the benefit of the doubt, because a lot of frontline workers are so caring and empathetic and give people multiple chances, obviously, or like, what are you doing at frontline? I don't know. Like, that's just kind of a job in my mind. And so, like, if we have to, that's like how we show up a lot of the time in our personal life as well. And if they're not learning, and if they're like not coming along, and then we just recognize that like this is just who they are, I think that does start to just become a filter, recognizing
Yeah.
the energy that goes at work, and then like having to do it in your home life and destigmatizing your home life is exhausting.
Yeah.
There is no place, I don't know, there's no place for it. I know Vancouver also is like kind of bi-phobic, and I'm using that generously, I think. And I know there's a lot of women that I've gone on dates with, and they don't know I'm bi. They just think I'm a lesbian. And then that's a whole other issue where they start going off about their beliefs on bisexuality. And it's like, okay, you're not the person for me either. Bye. 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 Bye.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really interesting thought. What you said, Tracy, with how in our line of work, like we often show grace and like patience when, maybe a client is not being like the best. They're not exactly being like very, you know, not problematic. And I guess I can see how that could translate into your personal life and your dating life too, because like, again, like you said, you want to like, you you want to give people the benefit of the doubt and like give people chances to like learn and grow. And so, yeah, that's, I don't know what your
Hmm?
thoughts on that.
I mean, yeah. No, sorry. Cut that
I
out.
think that's at like first, like I don't think that continues. I just think it's when you first get into the field, and when you
Yeah,
first start dating, when you first got into the field.
absolutely. And maybe you can speak more on this, because like, were you first going into frontline when you were with your
Well, but
partner?
I don't, here's the thing though. I can't separate, how do I say this? The reason why I'm in frontline work is because of my values and what I believe in.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't go the other way around. It's not like I started frontline work and then I was like, oh, because I had all of these like personal life experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I mean, and no, I mean, no shade to anybody who maybe that was, you got into frontline work because you were really interested and then you learned and then you adapted and you grew, because that totally happens for a lot of people. Um, I think it's hard because like, and this is kind of, we're kind of like deferring a little bit, but I think once you've been in a relationship with somebody and you, for years, for a very long time, and you're living together and your families are like this and your friends are like this and everything is so meshed, it's not as black and white. And I think in the
Yeah.
first little bit, when you're not living together, when you've maybe only been seeing each other for, less than a year, and you're not, and especially like this was also when I was, when I was in the closet, and I came out, so I was predominantly dating men, some women, and now it's like no, no, thank you. But I don't know. It's so hard to detangle your life in that way, and it's not as easy for a lot of people, especially if maybe you're living in poverty. Maybe
Yeah.
I counted on this person's half of their income to support both of us in our home. Like, it's not as easy to just be like, your values don't align with me, so now I need to leave. And it took a long time trying to work through those things with this person to realize that it couldn't work. And then I had to reach out for supports and help that were able to help me get me out of that situation. And it was very hard. Like, it took probably like 6 to 8 months for me to fully detangle myself from this other person. So I
Yeah.
mean, I just want to make sure that we're not oversimplifying it. I mean, when you first start dating somebody, and I think that comes with maturity within yourself and recognizing yourself and self-love, to say, I'm on this, date with this other person, and maybe our values aren't lining up and I don't appreciate that and like that, so I'm not going to see that other person anymore, and not applying that same thing to people that have been together for a very long time. That
Yeah.
maybe in the beginning they didn't see those things. Maybe they weren't talking about those things because the assumption was there that the other person was, because they were saying the right things and
Yeah.
doing the right things at the
I
time.
mean, that's like an extension of the conversation around like why don't people leave like abusive
Exactly.
relationships, right?
100%.
Especially when like
100%.
I don't know, maybe you like move in with the person like really quickly
Mhm.
and not really like getting to know them as thoroughly, or because they sometimes people hide about who they are in the beginning when
Yeah,
you're
and I
dating
don't
them
think you really know another person
until
fully
you
until
live
you're
with
living with
them.
them.
Yeah.
Like, you could be together for years and then you move in and you're like, oh, okay. Didn't know you did that.
Yeah.
Didn't know this was going on. So I don't know. I mean, navigating relationships are tough on their own, let alone also having that, additional, I think
Yeah.
additional pressure too, I think, as a frontline worker. I mean, for myself, I want, my family and my friends and everything about my life to kind of like um be cohesive in my own values and beliefs and principles. And I mean, like, that's not always true. Like, I have, you know friends from back home in Alberta, and Alberta was very, like, you're talking about biphobia, Tracy, biphobic, homophobic, all the phobics, every obic that you can be is what I grew up around. All phobics.
Oh, I know. Dude, my security alarm install person literally saw some of our rainbows in our household and was just like, are you guys gay? Like, legitimately, like, to our faces. And this was an individual that worked at TELUS.
Yeah. I was asked that in a job interview when I was 18. They were like, when are you, like, what's your, 5-year plan? And I was like, I'm going to work for this company because whatever. And then they were like, are you going to have kids? And I was like, I don't think you can legally ask me that. They're like, so you're not going to have kids? And I was like, I don't think so. And they're like, are you gay? And I was like,
Weird.
So, I mean, there's so many different
What?
facets. Yeah, literally. I'm not going to name drop, but I could. But I won't. I could do it.
You're
I
going to
won't do it.
name drop after this episode, you are, so I know where not to work in the future. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know. It's so tricky and complicated. And now, I mean, now I've come into my own for a very long time, and I've been single. I mean, single from my super long-term relationship, coming on 2.5 years, single from a little blip of a relationship that I had, like a year. Um, and I feel like when I decide that I'm going to start dating again, because it is hard. I mean, not just with frontline work and the work that you do, but also just like life. It's challenging. But when I do, and before, when I was starting to, after my last long-term relationship, is I asked the big questions on like the first date. All the things they say you don't mention, I mention immediately. Hi, how are you? How do you feel about the downtown east side?
For real though. I mean, why waste time? Like, those are the basics,
Literally.
right? Like,
or like, you know, talk to me about, you know, women's reproductive rights, people with uteruses.
Yeah.
How do you feel about, you know, sexuality, the
Yeah.
binary? What does that look like for you?
One time I went on a date with this person who was a shelter worker in the downtown east side, and I was super excited because I was like, oh my god, I'm going on a date with another frontline worker. They totally get me. I'm sitting at the table at the restaurant, and they walk in, first of all, 30 minutes late without telling me. Anyways,
One thumb down already.
yeah. The minute he sits down, he says, can't believe they're like letting people like have possession of like 2.5 grams, eh? Like, that's gonna make our job so much harder, isn't it? And I was like, that was the first thing he said to me. Not even, I'm sorry I'm late, oh my gosh, let me fucking get you a drink, whatever. It was, shitty opinion. And I was like, what the hell?
Shitty opinion.
Yeah.
I feel this, like, I mean, you know, coming out as a lesbian has been interesting because I feel like, you know, I go on a date with someone else within my community, and I think that they're going to have the same viewpoints as me, and they don't.
Yeah,
and it's shocking.
It's
Because I go on a date with someone who's maybe biphobic, and I'm like, ooh, I don't like that. Or I go on a date with somebody who's maybe like, I don't know, they're just very, you know, owning in on some of that like mask misogyny, and I'm like, oh, I don't know about that either. So I mean, that's never like a telltale sign that someone's going to agree. It's tough. I mean, we can keep this in the pod. We cannot. I don't care. But the last relationship that I had with a man. Sorry. Just kidding. No offense to any men out there. It's just me. I was in the closet. That's why. I had just been in a altercation with a youth, and I had to go to hospital for various reasons. And all my counterparts, my frontline counterparts, were like texting their husbands and their boyfriends and their partners, and they were like, oh my god, are you okay? And they're calling them, and they're like, I'll come pick you up, blah blah blah. And then I texted my partner, and he was like, oh shit, you okay?
Men, that's not how you act.
And that was it. And then he went to sleep. So I got home and I cried. with my neck was all messed up. And I'm like, ugh. Anyway,
I can relate to that. My ex-boyfriend, I got into a car accident, and he texted me
fuck?
2 days later, being like, "You good?"
Yeah. See, that's, so I mean, like, it's like, does Frontline affect my relationship? Not really, because they were a shitty person. You know, it wasn't Frontline. It was
just,
him.
Yeah, already problematic on its
own. Sorry.
Like, not that I had one experience that stood out around them being shitty after I had handled like an emergency at like the place I worked. But what I did have is when I started dating my current partner, his name is Thomas, and I'll just refer to him that way for the rest of this episode because that's who he is. My first incident when I was with Thomas, I went into shock for 8 hours after, and like he showed up, he gave me food, he watched over me. Like, it was very, like, he called my best friend who also is in this line of work to ask her what he should be doing. Like, he was just very on top of it. And I remember after coming out of that feeling like I never had that level of support before after something crazy happened at work. Like, not ever. So like, I didn't have like necessarily a bad incident where like, oh, I had to do this thing and then a bad response to it, but I was never supported either afterwards. And I didn't know that until I actually was shown the support. And then I was like, oh, this is how it's supposed to be. Which is kind of, that's messed up.
Aw, go Thomas.
I was going to say, Thomas, like,
A+.
2 for Thomas. Absolutely. We're keeping score. That's amazing. I love it.
For Thomas.
2 for Thomas.
There's a reason why I'm with him, like, after 4 years, man. You know? Okay, so Eileen, what's the next question?
Sorry, we beat that one. Let's move forward.
The next question is, how does being a frontline worker affect your relationship with your family?
Okay, just ask the hardest questions first. Cool.
Do we want to come back to them?
They're all going to be, touchy, I guess.
Yeah.
Is this like a who blinks first? Like, what are we doing?
Do you want me to go first?
Do you have something prepared?
Yes, please.
Do you know what you're...
Well, first of all,
Okay.
my family doesn't know what I do.
Hey, I can relate to that. Yeah.
Truthfully.
Mm-hmm.
They have a vague
Know what you
idea
do.
of what I do.
Yeah.
You're so close to them.
Yeah. Close. You know. Am I really myself around my family? That's a whole nother conversation. But if you were to ask my parents what I did for a living, I don't think they would not pass the test. Like they have an idea that I work with kids and I teach them not to use something around that. And then I've also heard I've been called a social worker. I've been called like all sorts of random titles.
Anything that falls under the umbrella.
Yeah, and I'm always just like, yeah, if that's what you think I do, sure. Because I just know that ignorance is bliss when it comes to family, or at least my family. So
Oh no, I broke my family's ignorance. I was like, no, we're not doing this. I'm not gonna pretend to be okay outside of work just to like make you feel okay. Like I was very, yeah. But it took them a while to get it. I will also say that. Like my mom, when we were growing up, my mom really believed in like volunteering and giving back to her community. So like there were times where we'd go down to like our local shelter in Vegas. When I was older in high school, I was volunteering at like the domestic violence shelter down there on a pretty regular basis. So I think like she just kind of assumes I'm doing that but getting paid for it. When I like first fully started after graduating university, the kid aspect of it was a bit new for her because we never volunteered in shelters that had like children in them. And so that piece was really new, and the piece of like the teenagers using was really new for her as well. And then when I worked at like as a healthcare worker for detox, that was something that was like way over her head. All she knew was that I was helping nurses and patients to not die during detox. And that's like there was like no further capacity around like the fact that we were also the drunk tank for Vancouver, so police would drop them off. And that like they were essentially in a cell. Like those things she didn't quite understand. But the political feels of how I feel around certain things and my personal values around certain things, like they definitely know, and they're very careful now about how they interact with me around it. It's not so much making statements anymore, it's asking questions and being more curious, which I think it was curated over a long period of time from so much conflict around you can't say that, like you can't act this way, this is not okay, and then being like I can't put that on them, like they're going to act however they want to act. And then me recognizing like I would much rather them just be curious in those moments, and so asking them to be curious, and then they showed up for me that way, which was really great. But even then, like I don't know, like we were on a trip recently with my mom and my sister, and there was this man who was like obviously very mentally not well, and like talking to himself and stuff, like definitely in some psychosis. And I walked by him, and my mom was like starting to really freak out. And this is a woman who doesn't stigmatize mental health to begin with. So it was just kind of weird for me that she, like her actions weren't aligning with like the work that she's previously done and like her own values. And so we had to like have a conversation because I was just confused around it. And she explained to me that some things happened in Seattle that really made her afraid around the houseless population that she hadn't told anyone. And it was really eye-opening for me in that moment as well, because if I wasn't curious, I would have never known what had occurred. And there was just a lot of incidents where like they were physical in nature, of houseless people coming up to her, and she just hadn't told anyone in our family though. So I don't know, I feel like sometimes as well, like those things, us being curious and us caring, I've learned more about my family than I think I would have before, because I think they feel more comfortable coming knowing that I care so much about the work that I do that I won't, like, I guess, like, stigmatize them or harm them. I don't know. I just feel like I went on a whole long thing and I don't know if any of it made sense, to be completely honest, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. And honestly, I can relate to some of that around the curious piece. It's a little different with my family just because they like I was like a child and like under their roof when a lot of the things were happening like to me and around me that kind of shaped my lived experience. So they already kind of got like a taste of what that was like from like the family supporting perspective. Um and I mean, like I talk to my family about um all those sorts of things all the time. And my viewpoints are very similar with you, Tracy. Like it's very clear, like where I stand and how I feel, whether it be my, political points, values, principles, blah, 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 blah. And I mean, there's some things that we disagree on just because I also think like my parents grew up in such a different, I don't know, they're like white Gen X, it's like, it's just, I don't know, it's just a little bit different because they might see things through a different lens. However, I will say, as I've gotten older and we've learned to communicate a lot better, we're able to be curious with each other, which has been really cool. And I'm able to be like, oh, like, why do you feel that way? Or why would you, say it this way? And then they can do the same for me, oh, I don't really understand that. I don't think that way. Oh, well, this is why. Oh, okay. I didn't realize that. Oh, okay. Interesting. And like, we might not totally agree with each other, but we can get to a middle plane where we can kind of be like, you're going to say what you're going to say. I'm going to say what I'm going to say. We're going to feel this way. And a lot of things we do connect on, which is nice. Yeah. Not everything, because if you connect with everything with your family, like comment below, because dang, who are
How?
you? You're
How? What
that's
occurred?
not, I
Was
feel like
that
that's
just
not
like
the
a
norm.
healthy
Unheard of.
household?
I feel like that's not the norm, yeah.
Yeah.
I really wish that like I had that sense of curiosity from my parents because like they don't ask questions. They don't ask questions and they don't give answers. We just like they're not very open people. Like I don't really know much about my parents despite me always being around them. I don't know much of their like backstory. They drop it here and there. Maybe my dad gets drunk on a random day and will tell me some of his story, but like other than that, like they don't really like to talk about what they've been through, which I know was quite horrific because they had to run from a war, like a literal war. And so I think a lot of it has to do with them just suppressing everything and acting like everything's fine, which translate into how our relationship is. Anyways, that's too much of my personal stuff. But I
We're actually here to counsel Eileen today.
I do wish that they would ask me about my job and like it's not like I'm hiding what my job is from them. It's just that they've never asked.
Yeah.
Right? Like
Yeah.
and there has been times where I've literally gone out of my way to be like, "Hey mom, have you ever heard of harm reduction?" And then like give her a bunch of information that she never asked for. and, and she's just like, "Okay," and doesn't know what to do with this information.
Mm-hmm.
The last um when I was working as an outreach worker, I really tried to explain to her what that job was and all that stuff, and all she could all she could envision for me at my job was being in constant danger.
I mean, but fair because you kind of were.
And so that's why I stopped telling her things because she would just get so scared and worried all the time. She was calling me all the time and just worried for my well-being. So I just kind of stopped telling her things, right? Like if she knew what I was doing today, like in the shelters and stuff, like she would probably have a heart attack.
Yeah.
So
That's how my mom felt when I worked in forensics too. She'd be like, "You can't tell me anything because I actually get worried and I get really scared." And I live out of province from my mom, so I never see her
yeah, so that's
or
tough.
my dad.
That's scary, right?
Yeah,
Like
so she's like, "If I don't hear from you for a few days," like while I was working there, she would be like, "If I don't hear from you for a few days and you like tell me this like big incident happened, like I'm gonna be very concerned."
yeah.
And so yes.
Oh, I had the same thing with my mom.
Yeah.
Like exact same. Because my mom lives out of country too, so it's the same deal. Like when you might text them being like, "Hey, da 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 da," and then they're like, you don't respond back maybe because you're just stressed or you read it and then you forget about it. And then they're like, I've been so worried. Yeah, my mom had to put down a boundary with me that if I don't call or text, I need to within 24 hours.
Yeah. And I think it's important, if there are any families or friends of people that are working frontline listening, just to speak on that as well. I mean, it's really important for us to be able to implement boundaries with family and friends in regards to, what we do and our values and our principles and how we feel and how we're going to be treated about those things. But it's also important that the family should be able to put boundaries on certain things if they're feeling, um, if they're feeling like maybe like they really care about you and they're scared that you're going to be in danger, they don't necessarily need to have that conversation, but just being able to say, like, you know what, maybe we don't need to talk about specifics today because I'm feeling really anxious about it. And I think that should be okay too, because what we do sometimes is it's a lot for us because we're in it. It's a lot for our clients because they're living it, and then it's a lot for our family because they care about us.
Yeah. And sometimes we forget like how traumatic something can be.
Definitely.
We'll like be casually telling them like, oh yeah, this happened to me at work the other day, and everyone's like jaws to the ground, and I'm like, what?
You're like, oh, it's such a silly story, and they're like,
I'm like,
like, do you have your therapist on speed dial?
yeah,
like, no, it's fine. It's literally that was a Wednesday. What are you talking about?
Like, I'm calling your psych.
Literally, yeah. And you get desensitized to a lot. You're just kind of like, yeah, that's just how life is. And other people are like, no, I'm an accountant and I've never had to deal with any of those things in my life.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, okay.
Okay.
I think it's also that piece around family and being worried about you and for you. Like, I refer to Thomas as my hubby. So, like, there has been times, because I'm on call, where I get like a ridiculous on-call call about bang bang violence or gang violence and, a program being targeted. And he can overhear the phone call. Like, I'm in bed. I just woke up. Like, I'm trying to like orient myself. He can hear the same phone call. And now I'm getting up out of bed, putting clothes on and walking out the door. And like that I know for him has been unsettling. And like he has pulled me aside to talk to me about it and just been like, I need to know you're safe when something like that occurs, and like just text me, because I'm not going back to sleep after that either. And I think that level of support from the family that you live with, but also recognizing that like walking out that door when they know you're walking into a dangerous circumstance, or if they know that you're in a dangerous circumstance and they are worried about you, but then showing up late at home because there was an emergency going on, but not communicating that with them or whatever it might be. Like, I do think sometimes we don't prioritize it because we are just so wiped out energetically that, or our phone dies or whatever might be the case. But I do think like the family that you live with as well is the family that gets impacted the most around those pieces, because you are bringing stuff home whether you would like to or not. Like, I wish I never had to bring the on-call phone home, but not that lucky.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I just think that there is kind of an inherent space that as frontline workers we need to be proactive in that, even if it's hard for us in those moments. And that's taken me a really long time to learn. I'm still not fully doing it the way I think maybe would be best. I don't even know what would be best. I don't know. Do y'all have any tips around that? Any tricks around that?
No, I think just like trying your best to communicate with your family around or friends, whomever the person who cares for you and you care for them in that situation, around what is going to make everyone feel like most comfortable. Like maybe it is like I don't know, like they'll text and like check up on you however many days or hours if they know you're in a dangerous situation, or per the week, or I don't know. Everyone is going to be different, so it's not like you can't really have tips and tricks in terms of like, this is how you do it. It's kind of like, that was a weird voice. I don't know why I did that. But just, I don't know, just me communicating more with my parents specifically, I can say that that's been a lot more helpful. And also when they're asking to educate versus me educating them when they're not asking me to educate them on things. Because sometimes that can look like I'm being like, or maybe it's too much. Maybe they're like, whoa, that's a lot of information. I'm like, and they're like, oh my God, stop. Like, I can't right now.
Yeah.
So yeah, just, yeah, setting boundaries the best way that you can, following through with your friends and family. And yeah, that's all I have. Do you have anything, Eileen?
No, I'm an avoidant, so just avoid everything. That's my tip.
Being avoidant.
Don't do it.
I'm just kidding.
I'm just kidding. No.
Do as I say, not as I do.
Okay, do we have other
Yeah.
questions?
Anyways,
Moving on. Take two.
It's like all of us are avoidance,
like-
but we don't want to talk about that.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. All right, Eileen, what's next on the itinerary?
I guess the next question I just had was more an extension of like the conversation we just had. I don't know if anyone wants to speak more on it, but it's more just so like, how does being a frontline worker, how does being in frontline work affect your relationship in any ways, in positive or negative?
And you're like, are you talking like romantic relationships?
Yeah, in a romantic relationship, I guess.
Oh, okay, I'm out.
Talk
Throw the
about.
cards in. Tracy, it's all you. Oh no, I guess. Sorry, Eileen. You might be in a. I don't know.
Is this only
I'll just say that.
is this only like family and people we're dating, or is this friends as well?
Any relationship.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so what I started noticing in my like friendships was that all of my friends were either in frontline after a while or were in frontline adjacent. So maybe they were like policy writers or lawyers or I don't you know what I'm saying? Like just like sectors that were like super duper close to ours that understood what our sector looked like and had the same like core beliefs that I do. And I find that I do not have other friends who are like not close to the sector or in the sector.
Yeah.
Which maybe is not healthy. Well, like, because it's also like I'm friends with a lot of artists, but artists I feel like are inherently this group of like wild children who just like to, you know, do what they do. And sometimes that includes drugs. So like I just feel like they kind of already fall into that sector a little.
I know what you mean.
Because like artists have been advocating for substance use for a very long time.
Yeah.
Musicians, artists, like this is not anything new. I don't think. So I'd be friends with Banksy if I knew who Banksy was. Like I'm certain we'd be friends.
Speak on the friendship part a little bit. I would say in the last like 5 years, everyone in my friend group has more predominantly become frontline workers. Like I've lost a lot of friends on the way, I've gained a lot of friends on the way, and now I'm like the happiest I've ever been with my support groups and the friends that I have in my life. Majority of them are frontline workers, and the ones that aren't frontline workers just get it because they're just naturally compassionate people, and even if they don't fully understand like something, they're more so like, instead of jumping to a conclusion or making an assumption, they actually like to talk about it and like ask. Their curiosity piece, right, is always like, hey, how come this happens? And like I like the fact that they're like, well, Eileen, you work in it, and you probably see this, like, what's your take on it, instead of being like a really hard assumption or opinion on something that's like problematic. Instead, like, I love that my friends come to me and be like, hey, I actually like heard about this, is it true? Like, what do you see, and like your opinion? And that's what I really like about my friends. It's more curiosity and openness to learn, even if they don't know everything, at least for my non-frontline worker friends. Yeah.
Yeah. I've got to meet some of your friends and I would say yes to all of the above because they're pretty chill people. The ones that don't work frontline are like pretty solid. I don't know. They've helped us a lot and they haven't had to.
Yeah. I just can't imagine like having a friend that just like didn't have that kind of mindset. It would just be really hard to get like support and the love and care that I need and like would like from them. I don't know. It's someone asked me the other day, like, oh, do you only surround yourself with people with the same political views and same like principles? And I was like, yeah, because that's just like how I feel the most loved and comfortable and supported. And I I just can't like imagine having the capacity to have anyone in my life that didn't have those same values. It would just be like so much work and mental stress.
Yeah, I agree. And traumatizing too, because then stuff gets said that you're not prepared for, or you're always prepared for something shitty to be said that you have to like wade through after and do that work of like, why did that hit me the way it did afterwards? But there was this
Yeah.
one meme going around Instagram for a while there around like, there's a difference of having like a political difference versus impeding on people's natural rights. And I never think people's
Mm-hmm.
natural rights should be impeded on. So racism, sexism, transphobia, homophobia, like that's just who they are. And that's not a political take. Like those people are who they are and they deserve to be treated like people. Like period, point blank.
Exactly. Those aren't. It's not me being political. It's just that's just like who I am. I feel
Yeah.
like, right. That's when people are like, "Oh, you're so political," and I'm like, "Is it though? Am I just, or do I just believe in human rights? I don't know."
But like a political, like I would argue harm reduction is political, right? And like, yeah, maybe you wouldn't mess with someone who wasn't like for harm reduction, but like maybe they were halfway for it here or halfway for it there, because different politics at play would change even our own viewpoints on harm reduction, depending on how things play out in a political way, right?
I think like that cultural piece is like really important to talk about because like even though like I say like, oh, I only surround myself with people who have like the same values and same political opinions as me, it's like it's not true. Like for the most part in terms of like friends and dating stuff, yes. But when it comes to family, there's a little bit more grace and a little bit more tolerance for it just because like my relationship with my family and how the line of obligation from parent to child is so strong in my culture that like unfortunately I do have to put up with a lot of like problematic beliefs when it comes to my family, which it goes back to me being like avoidant, like no hard conversations when I'm with my family kind of thing, right? So yeah.
Yeah. I think for my friendships, I mean, I think I only really have friendships right now that I'm meeting through community. So like I've met a lot of really amazing people through frontline work. And I've met a lot of really amazing people from the queer community. And in like this new position that I'm taking on, I've met a lot of really great people. And I think it's good for me. I I really enjoy having people close to me that we can relate on the same fundamentals, like Tracy you were speaking to, just like basically just like treating other humans like human beings. And I mean, as long as those things are in place, I feel like I can get pretty well along with almost anybody. And I think I have some friends that aren't in frontline work specifically, or maybe they aren't in the queer community specifically, and we'll have conversations that maybe we're both not like nodding and agreeing the whole time we're talking. But I think it's good for me to have people that are challenging me and why I think the way I think and why I believe the things that I believe, because I think sometimes, especially with the internet being the way that it is and the day and age that it is, it's so easy to just kind of like surround yourself in this like little bubble of people that are just kind of like regurgitating the same information. And to hear different viewpoints, I think is really important for me and my growth. It just needs to be respectful. So as long as we can respectfully have that conversation,
Mm-hmm.
and even if we disagree on certain things, as long as we can show each other respect and love and care, like just because you argue with somebody, or not even argue, just like having a difference of opinion, doesn't mean that there needs to be any hatred. It doesn't mean that there has to be any like, my way or the highway mentality. It can literally just be, I feel this way, I haven't really had experience in that. This is why, da, da, da. And for me, I love that. And I want to foster those relationships as much as I can. And then also kind of like naturally those relationships turn into, oh yeah, I totally see your point. Yeah, me too. And this is how I am, da, 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 da. And we end up shaping and shifting each other to kind of like, I don't know, get a better like viewpoint. Because I mean, there's so many things I've lived, as much as things have happened in my life where I've struggled, I've lived a life of privilege in a lot of ways, and having other people's perspectives is so helpful and healing for me to understand that. And it's so uncomfortable. Sometimes you sit there and you're like, oh fuck, this is really, I don't really want to be listening to this or hearing this, or I don't really know, but it's so important to do that anyway. And yeah, I'm really grateful for all of my friends. And there's so many, like I used to work in the service industry back in Edmonton, and it was just lots of drugs, lots of drinking, lots of partying, lots of staying up until 6 in the morning and then going back and opening the bar that you just closed down at 10 a.m. So I mean, my friends were very different, our views and things were very different, and I am definitely not as close with any of those people. A lot of them I don't even talk to anymore. So I think your circle is supposed to shift and change as you move through frontline work, as you move through different eras of your life. Like if you're in a relationship, you're maybe not going to have as many single friends necessarily, or when you have a baby, if you decide that you want to reproduce, then like that's going to change how your relationships and friendships are, and your viewpoints are going to change. And I think we need to be adaptable. I don't think like if you're going to stay stagnant in certain things, I don't know, it's like, why? It's like, be open to it. And then if you're like, nope, I saw that, slam doors closed, that's totally cool too. I don't know. I saw that, slam doors closed, that's totally cool too.
Yeah. My grandpa used to have a saying that people, friends who come into your life, there's friends for a reason, friends for a season, and friends for a lifetime. And I love it. I love that saying, because like the friends for a reason would be like, well, we're all working at the same bar. Our hours suck. So yeah, of course we hang out after we close down the bar because there's really no one else to hang out with at 3 a.m. And then like the friends for a season would be like kind of what you're talking around, like having a child, and that's a season, right? Like going through that, the initial stages of pregnancy, and who is staying for that season, who is staying for that transition in your lifetime. And then friends for a lifetime would be the friends who are there through everything, and who aren't piecing out on you anytime soon, right? So like you have a kid, they're still there the way they were there for you before you had a kid. And like they were in that transition, that season period with you, and then they're going to stay with you forever as well. And I don't know, I really like that concept. And I do put my friends in those categories when I start thinking about what my friendships look like with certain individuals. I'm like, these are lifetime buddies.
Relates to the next question I had, which was like, what are your deal breakers when it comes to relationships, friendships? I don't know if you want to include family to it, but what are some like values that you hold that are like non-negotiable? This person like has to understand like through and through, and like, or agree with you, like no questions, no discussions. When I say that, like, I only have friends with like who have the same values as me, it doesn't mean that we necessarily have the same opinions about things. Like the value is there, the core value of like believing like everyone has human rights and everyone deserves like a safe space, this and that, and the list goes on. But it doesn't necessarily mean that like their opinions on like how things should look like or how things should go would necessarily be the same as mine. Because again, like everyone comes from like a different background, everyone has different traumas and all that stuff, and it shapes the way that you view the world. So like I do like hearing perspectives from other people, but as long as the fundamental of believing that like you're not impeding on someone's like right to like live and love and all that stuff, and um as long as you're anti-racism, those things, as long as your opinion is rooted within those fundamental like values, like that's when it's okay for me. Yeah. So, but there are deal breakers that I definitely have that are like very rigid, I guess. And I don't know if you guys have them as well.
Do share. I want to hear some of these rigid,
non-negotiable.
Yes.
Yeah, tell me about your rigid values, because
Same.
I mean,
I want to know. I
it's
need an
so basic.
example.
Like my number one is, I just feel like a number one is just I don't know, the homophobic piece is a really big one for me. It's a big one, and a lot of people, I feel, every time I talk about it, I often feel like people are like shocked that that's like my number one go to. But I mean, that's just like because like most people's perception of me is like straight and non-queer, which is not really the case. But um yeah, like it's a huge trigger for me. I show a lot of grace and like patience, especially like at work with clients who are being problematic. But once they say something homophobic, I'm out. Like I can't stand that stuff. And I think the reason is because I like growing up from a very young age, most of my friends were queer, whether I knew it or not. Because and like, you know, by the time I was like in high school, all my loved ones, all my friends they all came out to me. And so like whenever someone is like being homophobic, transphobic, whatever it is, they're not just, you know, being problematic. They're literally insulting my loved ones. And that one, like, it's like a knife to my heart kind of thing. And I take it very personal. So there's non-negotiable. If you're like any opinion of like, you know, it's just a phase, or like you're not like, you know, um the idea of like, oh, men aren't really gay, they just haven't had good see or whatever, you know, things like those kind of ideas. I don't have any room for that. None of it. None of like these like trans women aren't real women type shit. I'm not up for debate. No.
Yeah. So it's interesting that, like, it makes sense. It's interesting that that is one for you. For me, mine is like ride or die. Like, the value there is the loyalty and the honesty. And those are my non-negotiables, loyalty and honesty. And they don't have to have any of my same values outside of those two, because I find for me personally, having some of the life experiences that I've had, it naturally means being around individuals who are homophobic or transphobic and who are saying things that I don't inherently agree with. And some of these individuals are still my friends, but if it wasn't for them, I also wouldn't be sitting in this chair right now. And it's really an interesting piece for me, because as you were talking, I'm like, but I would never give up that human. Like, you're talking about, you know, people being homophobic, transphobic, and I have had friends and still do who are, and I couldn't give them up because they showed up for me personally in such huge ways. And being a part of that community, they know I'm a part of that community. Like, they're not dumb to that fact. And so maybe that's dissonance on my part, um, or feeling loved and cared for by them and feeling love and care for them as well, and not being able to like give them up because they have been ride or dies and they are just honest around where they stand, and we can have discussions around like, this is why this is shitty, and sometimes their mind changes and sometimes it doesn't. But like, for me, it's that honesty and that loyalty piece go a long way. Or like, why are you even my friend? I don't, you know, I guess maybe that's a hot take. I feel like by Eileen's face that I'm saying that might be a bit of a hot take.
I would like to know. I would like to hear more around like how you navigate that, because like, what if this person like said something quite like hurtful towards like the trans community? Like, how would you navigate that?
So like, I think there's a difference of them being public about it and harming someone in the moment. Like, I would never allow that, versus them and us like hanging out in our homes and they're saying some shit and I'm like, hey. And it's normally a conversation at that point of like, why are, like, me coming to the table with a ton of curiosity around like, why are you thinking that way? Like, can you break this down for me? And like, sadly for a lot of them, and I'm reflecting on it, a lot of them are men who have been harmed by other men. So actually a lot of it does stem from this, like from it, I guess, from homophobia, because the men that
Yeah.
hurt them were men that really, really hurt them. You know what I'm saying? So like
Yeah.
for them, there's a lot of trauma and negative feelings towards that entire group now because of the hurt and pain they went through. So a lot of it is really just like looking at all of that and talking to them about all of that. And like maybe that's playing a bit of a counselor, I don't know, but I think that's also just being like a friend and being like, why are you feeling this way about this? Like tell me more. And then they
Yeah.
slowly as well, because I have friends from all different walks of life, they do slowly start to see, you know, that not all gay men are going to hurt them. And I think that that in itself is healing, and them knowing that like you can't say this shit around certain people. Like say it around me and we'll have a conversation, but you definitely will not be saying it in like my like birthday parties or any major life events. Like that's an absolute no-go, because you're going to hurt other people, and they love and care about me enough to respect that, and like are loyal enough to me to respect that. But
So I just wanted to go off on like what you said, like about, the ride or die piece of like having a bit of tolerance for, loved ones who might have like homophobic thoughts or whatever. I'm able to put that hat on when I'm at work because like a lot of my clients, unfortunately, like they like there's been a lot of instances of like racism, transphobia, and like homophobic at work, and this is like these are things that like I deal with on a daily basis. But like I'm not gonna bar somebody for long periods of time for like being homophobic. I'm not gonna like take away someone's like resources for, you know, having opinions that differ from mine because like
having bad opinions,
yeah, like
they have bad opinions.
bad opinion. Let's just say it like that. I'm not gonna like take away, their basic human rights and their access to resources because they have bad opinions or whatever. Um, so, but I mean, I just don't. I'm not able to do that with like people outside of work and
Yeah, I I think this is like another culture piece between maybe um like Canada and the US, just honestly. Um, where like the state I grew up in is not a liberal state. It actually is a battle state. So that means every time a like a political vote comes up, it's almost divided half and half. So that means there's not as much education around certain issues. Um, I would argue there is more racism, there is more transphobia, homophobia, all the phobias than I've ever experienced up here in Canada. Like, I think it's one of the reasons I can live in Alberta, because it's still not as bad as what I experienced growing up in Vegas. And I do think that that has a lot to do with it, because I know growing up, between my friend group, there was only one other queer individual that he and I were open to each other, but we kept it under wraps with everyone else. And I think that there is a lot of masking you have to do coming from those communities, and you like still needing friendships and still needing, you know, that those things like as social creatures. And so you can't come out, or you can't maybe be as vocal as you would want to be about people's rights, because it's really unsafe for you to do so. And knowing that also, sometimes just being that person of like you kind of already have an in. Like, we talk a lot about changing systems and how frontline workers want to change systems, but like I do kind of believe that starts at the individual level, because if you get enough individuals believing in something, then that's how systems change, right? And if we're not going to be those people in their lives to call them into a different perspective, because we all do kind of live in this bubble, how are they ever going to know? Like, because they're not going to go out and look at the research themselves. So, like, how are they going to know that maybe what they're being told is not completely accurate or is just one side of the story? And I think there is something to be said about that, and still coming to love, like coming with love to those relationships, just so that our entire community is better protected. Much to kind of what you were saying earlier, is like, that's the same reason why you'll cut someone off, is because you think about your loved ones and you're like, no, because that's who you're talking about, and you cut it off. And my thing is like, well, maybe I can change your idea enough around this that you won't do this, you won't say this shit publicly, like you won't harm more people in our community, I guess.
I guess like I haven't really had that. I haven't had much luck with like meeting people with those kinds of opinions, but are still like open and curious to learning. I've only met people who've only had hard opinions of like, nope, being gay is unnatural and wrong, and like they're not moving or adjust, like even capable of like learning from just that. Because
Then maybe curiosity is also one of my footholds for me. So loyalty, honesty, and curiosity. Like, because I agree with you, I'm recognizing that there are some people I have not continued friendships with because they won't even hear it. And then I'm like, nope, I'm not doing this. So yeah, I guess curiosity is one of my strongholds then.
Yeah, and I think I've definitely had people in my life now to this day that didn't have the same opinions, or like didn't think the same way that they did before, and have really developed and come a long way from their homophobia and come a long way from their like, colonized way of thinking. And again, it's like the access to the education, and having the people in your life to like to with like other experiences to like teach you and like tell you about what else is going on, and not just being in your little bubble of like the same information, right? But it's tricky. Yeah, it really depends on the person if they're open and curious about it, instead of having hard rigid opinions about it and set in their ways, right? Like
I'm rigid around you having to be curious.
yeah, have to be curious. We love a curious person.
Yes.
Danny, what are your non-negotiables? Like, what are your, like, absolutely the fuck nots?
Or do you have any?
I mean, it definitely differs if it's going to be family or friends. I don't have the same non-negotiables for
Yeah,
family
it's always
or
different with
friends or
family.
partners. Partners, family, and friends all have different negotiables for me.
Okay.
Non-negotiables, not negotiables. So like family,
I'm same in that category. Like, I'm same with that
yeah.
too.
Like with my family, just like family in general, I don't really have any non-negotiables, honestly,
Yeah, it's a very
because
gray area for
it's
that
a
one.
very gray area. It would really just depend on the circumstances, I think, and what was happening. But I would do my best to like protect myself in instances where if anything were to come up that was going to be harmful for me, I would definitely like do my best to try and insert boundaries there. With friendships, I think that curiosity piece that you're talking about, Tracy, is very important. I think that with friendships, I need to be able to have conversations. I like respect is a big thing in friendships for me. We need to be able to respect each other. And I mean, there are certain things, I mean, just like across the board with friends and relationships, like homophobia, where like because that's like who I like, I'm a homo. Like, you can't be phobic against
Homo.
me. Because then it's like, even if, and I really appreciate what you're saying, Tracy, because in regards to my family, I feel exactly the same way with that. In terms with friends and relationships for myself, I feel as though if I don't want to be putting time and energy and focus onto people that are perpetuating, even if they're, because I know they're not saying all the hateful shit that they're feeling in here to me. I know that.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And they're voting and they're doing all these things. And so for me, it's like, even if they might not be saying these things to me in like a hateful way, I know that there are biases because we all have our own schemas and biases that we carry around with us depending on like how we grew up and our environment and trauma and all those things, that if it isn't going to hurt me now, it will. And they might not mean to. I don't think that a lot of people who share these same viewpoints are inherently bad people. I don't think that they're out to like get other people in the way that maybe, is kind of portrayed for this group. But I do think that it is possible, even if it's like not. And I've experienced a lot of like hate crimey stuff, and I just don't have any tolerance for it anymore. So I think if as soon as I learn that information about them, it's, hey, have you reconsidered this? And as soon and like not even like that much pushback. And I'm like, okay, no, that's not for me. But like, would I not talk to another person that I knew was homophobic? Probably not. I would talk to them and say, hello, how are you today? But I wouldn't want to have a close, intimate friendship because I don't think I could have a close, intimate friendship with another person who believed that I was an abomination deep down. I just don't think I could do that. But again, work is different, right? I talk to homophobic people all the fucking time.
Yeah.
All the time. My grandparents are homophobic as hell.
Yeah.
They don't even know.
Some of my favorite clients are racist as shit. Love them.
Oh, my grandparents are so racist. Yeah. Like, and you're kind of like, okay, well, and I'm at the point where I'm like, you're very old.
Yeah.
You are going to leave soon, and there's not a point in putting everyone through so much turmoil when I can just do my best to protect myself and loved ones around me from you.
Yeah.
until there's no more time. In terms of romantic relationships, though, I feel like I have a lot more non-negotiables now.
Let's hear it.
And I think, I don't know, pull up my list. It's a long list. Actually, it's not that long. I want to feel safe with that person. And I think that is like my non-negotiable. And that will look different for every person that I'm encountering, if that makes sense. I don't know if it does. But if I'm not feeling the safety, if I'm not able to like open up to that person and like let them know, how I'm feeling and what is happening, and that might be, do you have space for me to talk about my frontline experience today? It was very hard. Or, oh, this homophobic comment that someone said to me, I don't feel good about it. Or, I really want to go and do X, Y, and Z, or these are my dreams, or these are my goals. I don't want the other person to be like, to have like an opinion about my dreams and goals and make me feel dumb about it. I want them to be like a really safe person that I can talk to about those things. If they're having a bad day, I want to feel like they feel like I'm a safe, like, I don't know. I just want that.
Yeah.
But with that comes, I don't want a romantic partner to not believe in autonomy for other people, whether that be uterus owners, whether that be penis owners, whatever. I don't want them to be homophobic. I don't want them to be racist. I don't want them to be, misinformed in terms of like Indigenous people in Canada. Like there's just, or on Turtle Island. I don't know. It's so hard to just say like, I wouldn't date you if blah, 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 blah. But I just need to make sure that we're like, it's safe, because I've been in a lot of very unsafe relationships and a lot of very unsafe friendships. And I just don't want to do that anymore. And I mean, the same things that I've told clients in Frontline all the time is just like, I want to be a safe person for you. And I think that I should get to choose that in my personal life as well. So,
well, like one of the values there is safety.
yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess not. I guess like I don't have specifics, but I do kind of.
The value of safety to you means a lot, but it also encompasses like those principles, right?
Things, yeah.
Right. It like branches out to like, what does safety look like for you? It's not being homophobic. It's not being
it's
this.
all those things.
Yeah. And I was reflecting on that. You had said the piece around, I'm not really that way with my friends, but I am with my family. And I was like, these individuals I'm talking about, they are my family. And that's because I was a little bit of a, I was what I was. But I, like, my community, my family were my friends growing up, like very heavy, with the exception of my little sister and my nana. And like everyone else in my family was not there enough to actually like have amazing relations with at the time of me growing up. But my friends I would see every day. And, we were making sure that we had all of our needs met. And so I feel like a lot of my friends and I were just kind of like little street gremlins. Like, those are the individuals, but also in the same breath, they might verbalize things. I'm recognizing they have never done physical harm to someone just because they are who they are. They have done physical harm for other reasons, but not because of someone's race, gender, sex, sexuality, none of that. It's usually, that was usually just like being a part of a gang and being gang involved. I don't know how that lands. I'm sorry. I just think we all have different experiences growing up, and I'm just recognizing that, like, yeah, my family were my friends, and my friends were a little fucked up because they were gang involved, and like,
It's good to have that perspective because, like, yeah, you're coming from a life where you said like your friends are your family, whereas like with you and I feel like it's more definitive. It's like our parents and our siblings are our family, and that's what we're more so talking about when we talk about like,
Yeah, when I'm talking about family, I'm talking about like generational relation.
yeah,
And then when I talk about like, friends who are my family, I still want to make sure that I'm like, I don't know. I have a couple friends that are still in Alberta that are like,
yeah,
some of the things they think and say, I'm like, ooh,
yeah,
I love you, but like, don't do
from
that
afar,
from afar.
from
Yeah.
afar.
like, I mean, I have one friend who is like, has done some shit, like, has really done some shit, but absolutely loves my grandma because my grandma got him food when when he was broke and didn't have any food for like 3 days. And so now, even though I'm no longer living in Vegas, he will still like hit up my grandma and make sure she's okay. And like, I do not think I would maybe be friends with him now if I met him, but because we grew up together and we grew up in the shit together, like, he is family. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if that makes sense. Like, maybe even like different, like that season thing, like he's friends for a lifetime because of the season that we became friends in. And so yeah, now he's friends for a lifetime. And he is a huge ride or die. And I feel incredibly safe around him, even though he doesn't have all of the correct opinions.
Yeah, I feel like this whole conversation is like really tough to have. It like it's a very broad. It keeps like going into other topics and not necessarily getting derailed, but like it's just an extension of like such bigger conversations.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
like yeah, everything you just said, Tracy, like that is an extension of the conversation we had earlier about how it depends on the community that you grew up in. If you grew up in a small town where everyone just has like shitty opinions, you're not just gonna cut out everyone in your life because like who's your community? You're all by yourself,
I mean, and some people do that.
right? Like you gotta have. Unfortunately, sometimes you're in a position where you have to compromise, and like I acknowledge like my privilege of having so many amazing people in my life that like that was never a fear of mine. I'm never like, oh, I'm not gonna be able to find another friend. No, I'm easy. Throw a stone. There's a good person, and like that's something I want to acknowledge, right? Like I've always been very like lucky to have a lot of like amazing people with the same values like come into my life, and I didn't really have to look very far to find them.
I mean, I'd argue like my friends have the same values as I do in terms of the ride or die. Maybe like they're even more excessive with the ride or die. Like, yeah, no, like I don't know. I do think as we grow and as we feel safer as well, our relationships look safer, um and we start vetting people different ways, right? Because even that group of friends I had then, it was to keep me safe at the time and to keep my needs met. So yeah, I do think, I don't know. There's also just something to be said about love, and that like when we can bring love and have the capacity to bring love into communities that maybe don't love us, there's something to be said about that radical love of knowing that maybe just you showing up in love in those communities can change those communities as well. But that's my hope, at least with the family members I have to navigate.
Do you guys think we're kind of like on track with the questions and the discussions with this? Okay, cool.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Do we have any more questions?
I was just gonna ask that. Oh, sorry. I don't want to fall on your knee.
Your poor knee.
Yeah, we talked about a lot of really important things
And hard things
today in terms of like relationships, and I mean relating to Frontline, but also just like relating to like everybody in life, and just like seeing who is aligning and stuff. So these were pretty like big concepts. Should we maybe like check in, see how we're all feeling, see how we're doing?
I feel good. I feel great.
I feel like I was very vulnerable with y'all, and I'm not sure how some of this stuff will like landed, so I'm a little bit anxious now as well, just like because that's me. Because that American side up here, I don't necessarily always share / don't share most of the time. So
yeah, but I think it's like really important like that you had those opinions and that came to light, and like I don't feel a type of way about it. Like to me, I'm like, no, it makes sense from like where you grew up and what state you grew up. Like I think it's understandable. I don't think it's like pussy.
yeah.
You know?
Well, and recognizing that other places, like especially in Alberta and maybe the prairies and some of these smaller communities, are faced with the same discrimination, and how like lonely that really can be growing up in those places,
Yeah.
I think is
I definitely don't think I would have had like the same experience if I grew up in like Alberta. Like I'm so lucky I grew up in BC where all my friends were all kind of very liberal and like, from the get-go at least. But I probably wouldn't be able to say the same had I stayed out in Alberta. I'm born in Alberta, but I like, left pretty quickly. So,
I think I'm not gonna fib, just because a lot of the things that we talked about really hit, like just throughout the entire episode, just really hit different places for me, just making me reflect on different experiences I've had, and people that I've encountered, and you know harm that maybe I have done to them, harm that they had done to me. So I'm sitting with it a little bit, but and not but I think that these are really important conversations to have. And just because you work in frontline work doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, we're all going to have the exact same experiences and the exact same opinions and values and everything else, and how that spreads into other walks of life. And that's like so normal. And like we're all friggin' humans, and we're all flailing frantically on this rock in space trying to figure out what's going on. So I mean, it's so great to have these conversations, and I love it. Sometimes you got to sit with it a little bit, and I think that's going to be me for the rest of today, is just kind of like sitting with it, absorbing it, and understanding, and reflecting on some of my own experiences and why I think the way I think, and you know, um, have I moved past maybe some of this harm that I kind of like allude to sometimes in conversations with other people, and like, is that really something that I'm like over, or is that still something that I'm struggling with? So that's kind of where I am, but just overall just grateful on top of all of that as well. So
yeah.
kind of a mixed bag over here.
like literally same. So literally same though. Like exactly, that is exactly how I'm feeling in this moment as well, around like the past harms and like reflecting on them, and like now also reflecting on my own boundaries moving into the future of like what will I accept or not as well, because that's not something I necessarily have thought of in terms of like my friendships too much. So yeah, I appreciate that. And I'll sit with it too. Call me if you need to. We'll talk more. I don't know.
If any frontline baddies out there want to share your experiences of how frontline work has experienced your dating life or your personal relationships, like comment below in our comment section.
Yeah, and if you're not following Frontline Baddies,
What are you even doing?
run, don't walk to your phone, tablet, computer, whatever. type in at Frontline Baddies on Instagram, at Frontline Baddies Podcast if you want podcast specific content. And then obviously you can find us at our website, www.frontlinebaddies.com. Please, we love all the support. Also, if you were able to rate the podcast, that would be super cool. We would love to see some ratings come in to see how you're all liking it, to see how, this content is sitting with you and hitting you. And we love our community and we're so happy to do the work that we do.
Well, thank you, Frontline Baddies. Bye.